ST, are you ready?
I'm I'm ready. Uh, Good morning, everyone. We're, I guess, on day two of our discussion of the eighth sense. What I'll do, I'll recap sort of what we went over yesterday, and still give a baseline for what the eighth sense is, so that everyone is comfortable using it in that term. Um, so, first of all, just going back, the purpose of us really trying to understand this eighth sense is to so that we can properly and confidently operate in this world as Elohim. It's a way for us to really utilize that power and understand how we do it day in and day out, as well as kind of balance and navigating different natures involved with being Elohim here on earth as we know it. But just to understand what the eighth sense is, and the question came up a couple of weeks ago that, what about five senses? So traditionally, they have been five senses that we use, and throughout the years, they've uncovered two more primary senses. And you could kind of research and look, and they'll tell you that there's up to 50 something senses. But for this discussion, this lesson, we're really focusing in on the primary senses. And these are the senses that kind of allow us to operate here in this earth and allow us to kind of navigate, even on the heels of Barbara's Ten Commandments, in which we know these senses are, sight, touch, taste, smell, and feel. And then you're going to add the hearing, but then you're going to add the last two, which one is basically equilibrium. So when you view yourself in relation to gravity here on this earth, how do you move? And the other is basically they call preconception, which if I have my limbs, what force is it going to take for me to lift my leg? How much pressure is it going to take me to push back on something? Basically the extremities. And then with the equilibrium part also, it talks about trying to do things in the dark, clapping, writing. If you're doing things that you cannot see and you feel, just recognizing your body in regards to other things neighboring. So that's where we get those seven senses. And then this eighth sense is really unique because it's something to try to use and figure out for years. It's sort of, it allows you to be able to forecast intuition. It allows you to really operate at the highest level of spirituality and be Elohim in this regard. Just like everything else, there is a flip side. And I've tried to really stay away from using psychic, but we'll get into it. And yesterday, we really defined what we want the ACE and what it should be for us, and it's a new beginning, but also learning about yourself, being able to connect with others, being able to communicate with others in a different way, utilizing these powers. And the eighth sense is bolstered or strengthened by our memories, sharpening our intuition, trust, and becoming who we are and when we need it to be. And then we also talked about some goals for this lesson, really, because this is something I really feel like we should be able to use as an individual to get the greater good into a much better position. But some of the goals are just sharpening our intuition, utilizing our memories, learning about who you are and what you are, sensing when to interject yourself in someone's lives of certain issues, feeling a true connection, and being able to use someone else's power. And we'll like as we go on, we'll get into it, and really accepting our anointing. And then finally is creation, learning how to properly create through our thoughts and making things into a reality. So those are some of the things that we introduced yesterday, and just sort of recapping one of the key components of where we started yesterday, intuition, and Nick gave some great insight to this too. But number one is meditation has got to be one of the things. If you're going to sharpen your intuition, and we'll talk a lot more about today, is utilizing meditation is one thing that we have to do. Increasing our wisdom is the second thing, because that's tied to being able to use your intuitive power. And George Clark made an interesting point too, that he talked about the emotions, because right now when we look at these seven senses, or your touch, taste, the emotional response is also manifested physically. So he talked yesterday about the emotional intelligence of things that we do, and then finally, really the same insights Nick gave about intuition, meditation, and wisdom, how they go hand in hand. So the goal of this lesson, once again, is really to help us operate as Elohim as much as possible. And this eighth sense, it's significant of a new beginning, and it helps us to function. So we've had the Ten Commandments before, how man was taught to function in the earth. But Jesus really showed us how to balance the relationship between two natures and how to really operate as Elohim. And he left so many clues and just examples of how he did that. And we've talked about them in the past, but we never really looked at them in that way, where we're supposed to function. We've always talked about who we are as being Elohim, but how do we use that? How do we function every day? How do we make things better? And the only way that you can truly, and I'm really seeing this now, the only way you can truly function as Elohim and operate as Elohim to the highest level is if you understand this eighth sense concept that we're talking about, because it's so much power in it. It's so much, usability, for lack of a word, but it tells us how to actually go about doing it. And any questions so far before we get started? But that was sort of like what we introduced yesterday. Or any comments?
Yes, this is Ron. I had to work yesterday, so I missed you. You mentioned something about using someone else's power. Did I understand that correctly? Can you go into that a little bit?
Yes, and I was, what I try to do in this lesson is kind of give those goals about how we should proceed down the line, and that's coming later. But for example, we're all in this call, and we talk about the greater good, and we just talked about Ukraine and in different parts of the world, different communities. And at some point, we have to acknowledge that there's a reason why somebody else has a higher level of insight in a particular area than I do. And if I need that insight, how can I tap into that insight? Just to use an example, Ron, if you're tax accounting, it's tax season, and we all know that we can kind of do our own taxes, but there's an insight that you have as a tax professional that I don't have, and but if we have a connection, I should be able to tap into that power. And if you put that in a spiritual perspective or life, real world example of me trying to accomplish something because I'm mirroring something I've seen you do, it's kind of like, or following a blueprint because really we all are kind of following Pastor's blueprint, but he's still learning and developing at the same time. But that's when you get into the levels of that, and once we get that far, we'll really talk about the different levels of power and insight that we need. And it's sometimes we don't have enough of that power by ourselves to accomplish certain things. But if I can tap into your power, it's going to help me, get it done, if that makes sense.
May I
But
address that?
Okay.
yes.
The way I saw that as I listened last night is that it's no different than my making contact with you guys and asking for your energy to be directed towards Phoebe. That's tapping into your power. That's sharing the power that we have and making it stronger than what it would be if it was an individual. Does that make sense?
Yes, because one of the biggest things that we see all of the chaos in the world, and one of the other things I didn't restate from yesterday was we talk about unifying things, and we can't unify unless we're connected, and what you just described is part of that connection. And as well, Ron, it's like we try to operate as individuals, and when we try to operate solely on just those 7 senses or natural senses that we're used to, that turns sometimes that's motivated, by a selfish part of it, and that's why some things in society now are kind of crumbling. We see different chinks in the armor, but if we truly utilize the power, like Pastor said, and when we need to tap into it, it just becomes stronger. And it definitely, I think the lesson to kind of lead us up to it. But but if we keep operating in the world now and we make decisions solely based off the smell, touch, taste, hearing, sight, those decisions get skewed and they get influenced from externally instead of internal influence. And we'll get back into that a little more today too, when we talked about our internal influence over our situation. I hope that helps too.
Yeah, and one of the things I hear you saying, when I think of the first 5, I think of anybody can use those without thought. It's part of a physical being, or those are things that you just do. But what you're talking about is an intuitive thing that you have to reach for, you have to desire to have, and it's available to everyone, but it's not something that everybody is going to seek out. So this one's quite different than just, at least the first 5. I don't know much about 6 and 7 either. But this just seems so much different than me just existing and touching and smelling and breathing. Those are natural things that I'm going to do anyway. But this is something I have to reach out and seek. And that's, to me, what makes it entirely different.
Yeah, because one of the things that the point Nick brought up yesterday too, if you look, like I said, you got sight, smell, taste, hearing, and touch, and vestibular is the technical term, but I use balance for the sake of the call of the other one, where when you're moving, you're controlling your body relative to gravity. On Earth, we're dealing with gravity. We leave this Earth, there's a difference in the gravitational pull. And then the 7th one, the proprioception, is like where you in position the different parts of your body. I use the example of someone being paralyzed, but they always want to make sure that these are things they've always done. Can you feel this touch on your toe? Even though there's a direct line or several of feeling, that's how they measure it. So those were added, especially with vertigo. If you think 20 years ago, 25 years ago, there was never a term for vertigo. We never heard that term before, but now they understand vertigo, they understand concussions a little more, and so that's why they've really added these other two main senses. And Nick brought a point up yesterday is the other thing, these senses that we have when we are stressed and things are kind of pushing on us, or we have coping mechanisms. So those get affected by coping mechanisms where you may scratch something when you're nervous, or you get a nervous twitch, or you react a certain way when stressed. So the eighth sense is really above all those, and so you take that's kind of a separate, more of a spiritual, not disconnection, but it's a different nature that it's operating on, and that's the nature that we are walking spiritually sometimes, but we also try to balance operating in this physical sense. But you're right, Ron. But that's what we sort of discussed a little bit yesterday on
it. The seventh sense is in between the spiritual and the physical experiences of the human. When you talk about compensating, making allowances for, quite frankly, my seventh sense has been damaged.
Right.
The vestibular system has been damaged. So I'm going through physical therapy in order to learn how to balance, how to maintain equilibrium when I'm walking. The greatest problem is when I try to walk in the dark, and I'm definitely not going to do it with my eyes closed. What happens is the right side, the vestibular system on the right side, is compensating for my imbalance or the damage on the left side. So when you think about the seventh sense, it's like I understood what Ron said when he said didn't know too much about the seventh, and neither did I until it finally dawned on me that that's what I am experiencing. The damage to that seventh sense, and the restoration of it is in process right now. Not an easy thing, but I think that maybe, I don't know, maybe the seventh sense is damaged was for the purpose of helping us to understand the clarity with a greater clarity rather, this seventh sense, since it's so different than the other six that we are already familiar with.
Yeah, that's definitely a transition. Like, if you think about someone who's amputated their foot or leg, how you still feel like it's there, and that disconnect or from the brain, you would think, okay, it's gone, so I'm not going to feel it anymore. But people do still feel their limbs and the position of their body, because they're sending energy there to move that. And so, like you said, when you're in the dark, and they have you, if you have a concussion, I don't know if anybody's ever had a concussion or has been around anyone that's had a concussion outside pastor, but they have you, there's a sensitivity to light that happens, and you are sitting in a dark room, and they want you to slowly transition and get your movement back to moving in the dark. And I don't know, not many people on the phone probably knew, but I was blind in one eye for a period of time, and you think that if you can function with just one eye and drive, well, I'll just cover this one up. It's not as easy. I thought I could drive back from Atlanta to Spartanburg with one eye, but I had to stop because you can't. It's when when your system is out of whack and you're used to functioning a certain way, that balance between light and darkness, it does impede your functioning. And so you do have to learn this stuff all over again. and it is and when you said that, Pastor, about the transition between that and the eighth sense, you even think about the what the pineal gland does. There wasn't really discussion about the pineal gland before, but that pineal gland, we always say that additional eye that's in the center, it regulates the flow of melatonin there, and so that's what helps you sleep or function. But that pineal gland regulates the flow of melatonin to our body. And so that's another part of that transitional piece there that he was just mentioning. We take all these things for granted, but in order to get to the eighth sense, and you have to master all of those things. That's
And
yes, I'm sorry. I thought I heard someone talking to me. So.
yes, this is Barbara. You said that you were blind for a while in one eye.
Hey, Barbara, would you hold 1
but-
second, please? Barbara,
Yeah, yeah.
with someone, would you please mute your phone? Would everyone check and make sure your phones are muted? Thank you. Okay, Barbara Jean.
Okay, I just wanted to make a comment. You said how difficult it was for that period of time you were blind in one eye. It is doable. I am also blind in one eye and have been since childhood. So it's one of those things that you learn to do and you compensate however you can. But I've always been blind in one eye, almost always, all of my driving years. And so am I still able to do it so far. Can't see everything I need to, no peripheral on one side, but you compensate.
You're right, and you do. I think I was 22 when mine happened, and it took me a little over a year or two to get over it. And I mean, my sight came back, and I always have like this permanent damage, but the sight came back. But it was it took a little while, and it took a little while dealing with light and heat, and going to a movie theater when you're in the dark. You see a lot better. Your eyes not throbbing, but then I see flashes of stuff in my peripheral. And so it took a little while but I adjusted. It's just that when it first happened, I thought, okay, I'm going to get up the next day and I'm going to drive home and come back to Spartanburg. And I couldn't do it. But like you said, you do learn to compensate. And if you think about these other senses too, we talked about increasing and sharpen our intuition. And I had my grand uncle who all my life I just knew he was blind, but he was, if you gave him a $5 bill back and it was supposed to be a 10, he could tell you. He walked up and down the road, and so his other senses were sharpened because he had to exercise them daily and use them to function. And we have to develop our senses, get beyond these 7 senses, master them, and sharpen this 8th sense daily to function. I think that was one of the themes yesterday, that it's a daily workout of strengthening these senses to where we're able to operate like we're supposed to. But definitely, Barbara, it's different, and your people never know because of you make it. It's just like you get over it and you adjust and you go on, and so nobody really thinks about it. But it is an adjustment, but you do it makes you more insightful, I think.
Hey, Steve, this is Charles. As you was talking about the one-eye thing, that happened to me too, but mine only happened briefly. There's other thing about when you lose limbs and stuff on your body, and I had to learn how to walk again, but I had to use electrodes around my waist, and the electrical energy flowing through my body, it messed with the nerves and stuff to make you walk. When you couldn't walk, the electrodes they attach you to stimulate the muscles to make your leg move to walk. So, due to energy, have anything to do with deal with this too?
So Charles, I appreciate that's real insightful. I think the energy has a lot to do with it. I mean, we all experienced it. They've changed building codes because of this. You walk through your house and you go to flip the light switch on, you get that pop. I mean, we're nothing. We're a big conduit when you look at the physical body, and but the energy, for instance, that you create with your mind to make you take that step. Or like Rev said, he was walking and learning how to like walk in the dark again. Your mind is generating that energy and trying to send it to that point. But when it's getting clouded or there's like a disruption or conduction issue, then that's when it comes back to the repair or trying to get it back in line. And there's a focus so that you can kind of organize that energy again so that it is functioning in every part and every way that it's supposed to function. And sometimes it takes a while. I mean, a concussion can linger for a long time, and it takes a while to really bring everything back in line and fine tune it. But the energy is a part of it. If you break a current, it's not going to work properly. I hope that helped, and I appreciate the insight too.
That helped because, like I said, because I had current broken, torn, where I couldn't walk, and I had to use other source. But like I said, my mind and the brain or whatever you said had to fit in that too to make everything do what it's supposed to do.
Yeah. And I'm going to use an example from that to hopefully explain this part yesterday that we talked about. Only you can do that. We talked about intuition and intuitive power. It comes to a point too. We used the word self a lot yesterday. One self. Only you can actually tap into that for yourself. And then once you tap into it, you understand. We talked about meditation. Nick was talking about meditation yesterday. And I was saying, like until you actually experience the benefits with meditation, Kathy talked about meditating and breathing all the time. But until you actually experience it for yourself and feel it, it's not the same thing. And that's where, when you start transitioning from the sixth and seventh sense to the eighth, that's where you have to do that part for yourself. And then once you experience that benefits of meditation and that connection, now you understand how your connection is with somebody else who has experienced it. But if you haven't, and I'm not telling everybody, this is, what you have to do, but if you can take a brief, 10, 15 minutes in a day and just meditate and allow yourself to quiet everything and connect, you'll understand what somebody else is saying, what the benefits they are from the meditation. And that's where the connection is, because we talked about self-taught things yesterday. And these are one of the things that you're going to have to self-teach yourself based on what we're already like our whole foundation here is based on truth. You hear that truth, but you also have to understand it and digest it for yourself. So it's as I said, this was something that I started looking at a year ago for a lot of different reasons. Just learning more about myself and looking at some of the external things that kind of happen. Pastor and I've had this talk about just watching the family member experience the dementia, and and I look and you feel helpless but you wonder where's that disconnect at, because you see the senses and stuff going in a different area, but no matter what, this new beginning, we all have to like sharpen our own intuition, pull from our own memories. We have to get to that point of doing it for ourselves and teaching ourselves. It is like the scripture we used yesterday. Jesus went in and he constantly increased his wisdom and understanding. He constantly went in, because that's where you start getting to different levels of it. You start pushing yourself by the more you digest and strengthen. We used the term working out your spiritual endurance yesterday. The more you build up your spiritual endurance, then these senses, you begin to you're able to use them more. You're able to, and ultimately the goal is to benefit the greater good of mankind. But we have to do our own individual part. When it comes to this part, you're going to have to walk inside you based on the wisdom you've received and begin to unlock those things. And Charles, I appreciate your example, because when you woke up, I got a question for you. When you woke up every morning, when it first happened, when you laid down, did you feel everything was whole?
Yes, I did.
And so that's the thing. When you're there in that quiet place, you feel everything is whole. You don't know it's not, because your mind is in a place where it tells you that everything is fine. And we've all had, some people have had, to a lesser extent, broken bones or surgery to where you can't move something, shoulder, knees. And when you're laying there, when you're absent the pain and you're just thinking, you feel whole. But when you use it, you try to use it and function, that's when you realize, okay, I'm not. And so that rehab, now just kind of look at it as a spiritual rehab for you right now. We're not whole as Elohim. We have sparks and pieces of it, but how do we function daily? And so that spiritual rehab, just like you rehab your leg, people can help you, but you're the only person doing the rehab for your particular self. We have to go in and rehab and increase our wisdom and sharpen our intuition for ourselves, and then come out so that we can function for the greater good, if that makes sense.
It makes sense.
Yes. I want to speak to the icon. When it comes to meditation, and we understand that meditation is what connects us, or what gives us greater insight and helps us to become comfortable with the eighth sense. You have to ask yourself, if the desires that we have for mankind, is it worth 15, 20 minutes a day? Or is your life worth 15 or 20 minutes a day? When it comes to meditation, are you saying that out of the 7 days in a week, every day, all hours of that day are committed to so many things that are so important until they become more important than 15 minutes of meditation? I think that's a question that all of us has to answer for ourselves. I'm done.
Yes, sir. And I used the term yesterday, Rev, just to kind of like give everybody I was trying to think of a term, because I think we all have this in us. Is an autodidact, and the definition of that is a person who focuses or is focused on attempting to acquire new knowledge, a person who has expressed motivation and willingness to learn something new no matter what, and to teach it to themselves. So, and I've used that example yesterday because I think we've been given so much information that we have to get to the point of, okay, going into ourselves and sharpening ourselves so that we can really apply it, live it, and walk. And that's the term I used yesterday. I didn't want to, but that's what an autodidact is, somebody who's self-taught. Now, you have some people that they just teach themselves everything they want to know. They self-teach themselves. But we've been given a foundation to where when we do meditate, we can teach ourselves by increasing our wisdom. Just like Jesus did, he would talk to the temple, he would listen to people, he would pull in information, and Jesus would go back and he would meditate, he would increase his wisdom constantly, so that it was always a focus of his to acquire new knowledge. And it's no different than us, what we're doing on a day-in-day basis. And I think Audrey asked the question before we left, is our intuition attached to wisdom? And it is, because we need that wisdom. That we use several examples about tapping into that memory, so that moving forward, you're able to make better decisions day in, day out. And that's really how you operate. First of all, is a little something as making a decision, but make that decision now operating as Elohim, based as someone operating just on a few of the senses. If that makes sense.
Yes, this is Ron. A little while ago, you used the term spiritual endurance. Are you talking about just a strong desire for something and meditating on it, or is there something more to that? But I was trying to figure out how you used it and what you meant by it.
Yeah, so endurance, you could run a mile, and I probably can't run a mile. But when we get to the point of the spiritual endurance, how long can I operate without, say, going back in and recharging myself? For instance, I'm saying old school, we would pray. You pray, okay, Lord, pray, help me make a decision on this. Or I'm just going to throw it out the church, please pray. We're trying to make a decision on this. Well, what if that period of time is extended so far out that because you're operating as Elohim, you don't need to pray, because in a sense, and I'm thinking it's either Galatians, it says walking in the Spirit. When you're walking and making decisions as Elohim, all your influence comes from internally. So there's no doubt you made the right decision. There's no doubt you're operating under the best information, because your guidance, we would say, okay, Holy Spirit, guide me. Well, now get to the point now you guide yourself, because you are Elohim, but you operating with the perspective of Elohim in everything you do. It's about taking on that God's, we're gods here in the earth, taking on that perspective, and everything you do is functioning under that guideline. You've moved beyond the 10 Commandments, so to say, that everything, because you're constantly in line, you're constantly tapped into, and that's why I'm saying that spiritual endurance, where okay, I'm locked into it, and I'm operating from the Elohim perspective, versus trying to balance all the time the two natures that we all have, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Hey, this is Nick. I wanted to add something to the ST where you're just talking about prayer. I think a huge sort of misconception about prayer within a religious setting is that it is an appeal to something outside of yourself, in the hopes that it will do the work that Jesus came to tell you that is our responsibility to do. And many other spiritual traditions, it's the same. And the religions that form in those spiritual traditions behave the same way. But prayer is not an appeal to some outside force in the hopes that it will do what you ask. The reality and the spiritual nature of prayer is the focus of attention and the direction of your energy towards a particular purpose or towards a particular vision that is held within your mind's eye. And through the direction of that energy, you can affect the reality you experience. And the degree to which we're able to maintain a clear, focused, and internally, like emotionally and mentally stable and healthy self is directly reflected in how well we will be able to draw from the core, our spiritual core, and direct that energy in the direction that we desire to go when we meditate or when we pray. And those two are the same thing.
Oh no, yeah, absolutely. You know, I thought about what we said yesterday too, and then you talk about the and past, and you may be able to phrase this a little better, but yesterday, and I thought about it after I said it, and I was like, yeah, that is true. Like all of creation is already made. Like everything that's created is here. And so there's levels to creation. That's what I said yesterday. Like there's the ultimate creation, and then we have levels to creation. And what I mean by that is like, you know, everything we need is already here. Like in this earth realm, we use the example of a battery. Like all the ingredients, the elements are here for the battery. And our creation takes place is that we organize the thoughts to make that battery based on the ingredients and everything that we were already given here. And so there's levels to creation because we're not going to create any new material. It's all here. We're simply creating with our thoughts what these materials are going to be used for and how they can be done and how to organize our thoughts to create something based off the raw material. And it's the same thing with our spirituality and our praying. That's, you know, like that's here. Like Nick, you said that, and said, yeah, that's early. But we just need to organize our thoughts and channel that energy in what we want to do. And that goes back to what I was trying to explain to Ron. I hope that it's like we walk in the spirit, and we used to say, well, you walk in the spirit of God, and we have the privilege of God, and we're able to discuss those things. But really, once we receive that, and we'll go to Galatians in a second, I'll show you what's in Scripture. We just have to become that and be that and just operate in that, and not necessarily, we are the prayer. We're just really organizing our thoughts for what we're praying, what we're applying ourselves to. But we are the,
Go ahead.
I'm just saying that we are prayer. We are what we need when we need to be it. But it's just how we apply it. It's what we have to get used to and how to do it.
I wanted to make a suggestion. When we talk about, I think when we mention the idea of different levels of creation, I think it speaks more to the depth of your desire to create. If the depth of your desire is to create something, for example, the guy who created the cell phone, his desire was to create a phone that was small enough to carry in your hand or in your pocket. that the depth of his desire was that, and he focused on that, and he brought it to fruition. So when we talk about creating things out of what's already here, it depends on the depth of your desire. When we talk about recreating ourselves using the spiritual material as opposed to religious material, we are actually talking about the depth of our desire to become or to recognize or to become aware of who and what we were created to be, as opposed to what we have been molded into. The difference is this: what we have been molded into comes from pure intellect with no influence from the spiritual. When we become aware of who and what we were created to be, it is the spiritual wisdom that's influencing the intellect that guides it, as opposed to the intellect that is the intellect that is guided by the thoughts of mankind. For example, let's look at this from a different, more understandable position. Let's look at Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell is very smart. He is very intellectual. He has the intellect to navigate this society and has proven it time after time. But his intellect is based upon the thoughts of a Machiavelli. His intellect is based upon the guidance of philosophers as opposed to the guidance of spiritual wisdom. And that is the reason he does things the way he does them, because he is not aware of the reality of the spiritual wisdom that is needed to influence the intellect. The intellect is the mind, and that mind is what what brings our thoughts together to function in the physical world. The spiritual, if the spiritual is guiding those thoughts, then we are able to function in both worlds, meaning that we are able to be human. It is, you cannot be human and neglect the natural or the spiritual. Both, it takes both of those to be human. So when we are desirous of becoming aware of bringing it to fruition or creating something, we have to ask ourselves, where is the influence coming from? What is the desire, and why do we have that desire? I'm done.
This is Barbara. Pastor was talking about McConnell and his functioning in his own intellect. And one of the reasons why we had to revisit the 10 utterances is so that we know who we are. We know the basis of our being, and that basis is that we are spiritual, and that the 10 utterances taught us how to be that human with that spiritual foundation, because that's who we are. It's not only our foundation, it is the essence of who we are. The thing that you're talking about now in terms of the eighth sense, and the thing that gets us there is meditation. And you've said it, and Nick has said it, Pastor has said it, Kathy has said it, is that we have to train ourselves to be able to listen to ourselves. Someone yesterday talked about, well, I can't be in a room by myself unless I have something, noise, radio, whatever. And those are the distractions that keep us from hearing our thoughts. But now that we know who we are, we've got to train ourselves to be able to listen to the thoughts that we have so that we know what we hear when we hear it. And meditation does that. It teaches us that it's okay to be with and in yourself and to listen to yourself. For instance, I think Janice gave, after you talked yesterday about intuition, and Janice gave an example of, driving along the road, and you have the sense that, if you pull over, the car in front of you is going to do the same thing, so you better just wait to make sure there's no problem, no issues. And by and large, what happened is the car pulled over, and because she had listened to herself, was able to avoid something potentially happening. After you talked yesterday about intuition, I was driving yesterday afternoon, and what I heard was pay attention. Pay attention. And I thought I was paying attention, but after I heard it, I kept my eyes on the road. All of a sudden, there was this car barreling toward me in my lane because it was trying to pass another car. And I had to brake very hard in order to miss it and allow it to get back over in front of the other car. But that's just an example of our having to develop the sense of listening and hearing ourselves, because that's where the intuition and the wisdom marries. The intuition is the switch that says, okay, something's, you're getting ready to receive some information, some wisdom that's going to be useful to you, or useful to you for the purpose of something else. And so out of all of this, what I sense is that this next series in your teaching is helping us to understand the importance of getting in touch with ourselves, being able to hear ourselves, and to act thereon. And not only that, because we know who we are, to trust what it is that we hear. Thanks.
No, I appreciate it. You're dead on. One of the things I thought about after Nick said that yesterday too, because we talked about practicing it, is writing down a few things, and I'll look to see where, and I had 20 written down, but really the way we get better at intuition, like you said, is building it up and strengthening it. Is number one by far meditation. And these are exercises we can do. You can meditate. The other thing is pay attention to your other senses, like really understand them. Anything that sticks out, understand your other senses, number two. And if you have dreams, we talked about the numbers and what people say. I saw 734. I'm going to play that, but pay attention to your dreams. The third thing, and then reflect on what we create. I mean, we talked about that a little bit yesterday. Like do a weekly assessment on what we create, but reflect on that. And then test what you believe. Like you can do small tests, big tests, but test what you believe. And then the other, increase our wisdom, which is what we're doing every weekend, and then what we can do when we're individually by ourselves, increase our wisdom, connect with others. And the last thing is what you just said, Robert, practice listening. If we practice listening, it helps us so much more. And for those who were on the call yesterday, Janice gave the example of the car, and how to basically give yourself enough time to react properly. And one of the things that, and Pastor said this, I'm going to read this real quick because when he said it, I thought about the scripture yesterday when he said it about Mitch McConnell. one thing we've done as mankind is we've tried to hijack things and make it for profit. We've tried to hijack things and try to benefit off it. But I'm going to read this scripture now, and I'll talk about what I mean by that. This is Colossians. We read it yesterday. Colossians 2, verse 8 through 10, or verse 8 and 9. This Colossians 2, verse 8 and 9. And this is what happens when we're really not guided in the proper way, like a Mitch McConnell. It says, see to it that no one takes you captive by philosophy and empty deceit, according to human tradition, according to the elemental spirits of the world, and not according to Christ. For in him the whole fullness of deity dwells in the body. And so that's kind of like a summation of the example Pastor gave with, you know, you can be distracted so badly that you go off down a whole nother rabbit hole, another path, and then all of a sudden your influences become more external and more external and more external, and that's kind of the result of that. The other thing the one thing that mankind has hijacked, and the thing that intuition gives us, is the ability to forecast things. When you're intuitive, you're able to see what's coming down the line. And Janice used that example yesterday, which was great. I could kind of relate to that as soon as she said it, because we're always practicing, you know, defensive driving. And they tell you if you're looking a mile down the road, you can see what's going on in front of you. It gives you more time to react versus someone that's got the head down on the phone or whatever. You get more time to react. So the better we're prepared to look ahead and see what's in front of us as far as we can see. You can't see for miles, but you can see what's ahead of the horizon for you, and it gives you a little more time to react. And we call that forecasting. And so mankind, and just man in general, we've hijacked forecasting so that we kind of have that. We're kind of like Pastor said when he was in the concussion and walking in the dark. We've hijacked forecasting so much that we're in the dark on it, because we use it now. The only time we use it, we look at the weather. Man, you know, we think, okay, what's this week going to look like? Okay, it's going to be raining on Thursday. We try to forecast money. The economists, they tell you what stocks are going to do well, and we try to hijack that and get our money right. And so we are using, you know, intuition principles, to do that. And then, you know, you have scientists as well that, you know, basically they're looking at things in the past, astronomers looking at things in the past to kind of predict the future. But we get so clouded, we're kind of in a dark room with all these things from a forecast perspective that we don't help ourselves forecast spiritually, because if we are walking in the perspective and principles of Elohim, that means our future is being organized further ahead of us than, you know, if we're not walking in this day to day, because we use the term, don't worry about tomorrow, it's going to take care of itself, just, you know, living today. If we're also walking in today, then tomorrow doesn't worry about itself, because we're walking in the perspective of Elohim and we're operating that way. But it gets cloudy and confused when we're not operating that way. And so then, you know, you have to depend on so many other things to help you navigate. And that's where we keep going back to, we got to operate in these two natures. We know it because Jesus did. We have to. But we keep depending more on external factors to operate and navigate day in, day out. And we've got to, like, get ourselves in tune enough to where we're operating internally to navigate day in and day out. And that's it. The driving is that's an easy example that we can really see and relate to, because if we're paying attention, we've got a better chance of, you know, watching out for the errors and missteps on the road, if that makes sense. Yeah.
that makes sense, ST, because when I was in the hospital, this young man was in the hospital room with me, and they was telling him that he was gonna have to be discharged, and I was looking at him with both legs broken and arm broken. How they gonna discharge the man? And the nurse went back, so we're gonna talk to the doctor and see, what we're gonna do. They came back to him and they said, well, we're gonna have to send you home, but we don't have no money to send you home, nowhere getting you home. And the nurse left and he was talking to me. And I was saying, what can I, in my mind, I was saying, what can I do? I don't know how to help him. And your teacher's going to come up in your head and your thoughts and say, all I had taught you and you can't help him? And I said, what? Still, I wrestled with it for a while, but I had to tell him, I don't care what they say, how they're coming here and approach you with it. I don't care if your mind slip of saying you don't know what to do or how to deal with it. I'm gonna tell you, they're gonna find a way of getting you home. It ain't gonna cost you anything, and everything's gonna be paid for. And he looked at me like I was crazy, but he knew I knew what I was talking about. So they came in there just like I had told him, and he looked at me. I said, don't worry about that. I said, they'll come here and tell you anything they want to tell you. I believe what I believe. You're going home the way I told you going home. And when the nurse and stuff came back in, the doctor stuff came back in and said, yeah, we fixed it out to where you'll fly on a plane back home and you'll have a facility on that plane where you laying in the bed with your leg and stuff propped up, but you be strapped in, but that's the only way we can get you home. And the boy looked at me. And I said, thank God that you're going home. And he looked at me again. But to say what I'm telling you, I mean, at that time, I didn't understand. I didn't know. But I always heard Reb say, I got it. But I understand more and more as I've been taught. Yes, I go wrong. I do stupid stuff. But I know without a doubt this stuff that we get, that we hear it, that we trust in, don't worry, don't think about it. It's going to happen. And it's going to work. Regardless of what you think, what you feel, it will work. No matter what.
Now, Charles,
so that boy left with a smile on his face and joy in his heart.
Charles, I appreciate that. You give an example of the two things we said earlier. I think it's 2 and 4 on that list that I said. You realize who you are in that moment, and that's what a lot of us, we realize who we are in that moment. And then the other thing was you knew when to interject yourself. You knew when to step in. And so that's 2 things we talked about earlier this morning. It was like you knew who you were at that moment. You knew what was inside of you, and you knew when to step in for this person. You feel that connection, and it's when we got things in common, and we see it. It's so easy to realize connection, and then we get these feelings in our gut with intuition sometimes too. We don't understand it. And we don't know that's the connection here too, and so that's when we get that level of sharpening and improving that part of it. But that was spot on when you talk about knowing who you are at that moment, and interjecting yourself for that young man at that moment so that you gave him what he needed at the right time. And a lot of times, in the past, and, I've been used to be a restaurant manager, and Sundays people will come out from the different churches, and you just there, like, okay, I'm here, I'm working, it's Sunday, I'm working, but everybody coming from church. And you'd be amazed at the amount of people, like, they want to run up to you and just tell you and try to put on you what they just heard in the message 15, 20 minutes ago. It's sort of tone deaf in a way. At the same time, it wasn't time for them to interject it. But that goes back to the Colossians scripture, where you just, like, the philosophy is like, okay, I'm coming out and I just heard this, I'm going to tell everybody this. And it doesn't apply to that moment. But this is what you just described is real. That's walking in that eighth sense mentality and that perspective that it's real. You knew when to operate is what you needed to do for that young man. So that's a perfect example of just being who you are supposed to be and interjecting when you're supposed to. And it just that's the level of training that we're taking ourselves through to just perfecting that. So I appreciate it. Any other comments or questions on it?
Yeah, this is Nick. Thank you, Charles, for sharing that. And that's like, the better we can sort of refine our ability to hear what we receive through our intuition, the more clear those kinds of opportunities become. And you can clearly sort of hear what it is you have the ability to do in a given situation. And there's just within ourselves a lot of noise in the way, a lot of sort of emotional baggage, and not in the negative sense, but emotional trauma rather. Or I should say not in the selfish sense, but emotional trauma, etc. That is part of what makes up our unconscious experience and mind. And that is the stuff that makes it very difficult to hear those kinds of messages, and it makes it very difficult to feel the influence of aspects of ourself and spirit that we don't normally know about. So when we can meditate and learn to heal ourselves, as well as make that sort of internal noise calm, then we can more clearly know exactly when we're in a situation that requires us to do something, and then we can more clearly know exactly what to do or say, etc.
I 100% agree with that, Nick, because that's the spot on, because what Charles described too is that was spiritual creation, Charles. You created something there. And those are the kind of, we see physical creation, but we don't necessarily always see the spiritual creation. What you created was a level of comfort for that young man. You created something that he couldn't get physically. You created a spiritual level of comfort, and that's the kind of creating that hopefully we'll get into a little more as we travel down this journey together, because it's levels to creating. And we see things created physically so much easier, but spiritually, for you to act on that thought and to get that over to him, because the other thing that he received it because it probably calmed him down, and that the minute he received your spiritual creation, that connection was made. So when we talk about connecting to others, it's not always knowing what the other person is feeling all the time, but what do they need at that moment. And when he received it, that connection was made, and you created that spiritual place for him. And those are like the creations that we have to refine ourselves, like Nick said, we get better at understanding it. We get better at molding ourselves so that we are able to identify things much more easier, give the proper response, give it the proper time, because we, like I said, you're basically, if you want to call yourself a tool, we want to be a well-oiled machine, and there's certain things that we have to do to get ourselves in place spiritually to operate as Elohim. And that's why I keep going back to this first step of understanding how to sharpen it and develop your intuition to the highest level possible.
I would like to add on to everything that's been said over the past couple days, and especially as it relates to intuition. When we keep saying intuition, what we're actually referring to is actually the mind of Elohim. We're talking about tapping into, as earlier when you mentioned earlier about, and Pastor mentioned, I just listened to yesterday's, I wasn't here earlier today, so I don't know if he mentioned it today or yesterday, but the idea of everything has already been created. So in a sense, any problem that is, in a sense, going to come up that hasn't even arrived yet, the answer or solution to that problem already exists. When we are using our intellect, we're coming from a place of thinking, in a sense, through our mind, which is, physical and human like. When we are tapping into our intuition, we are tapping into not only, in a sense, our Elohim mind, but the mind of the Creator, the mind of God, the mind of all that exists. That is something of who and what we are. Even a baby that comes into this physical existence, when we say that child has been here before and that child acts accordingly, that is from the place for which that child is acting. That child is not acting from a place of intellect at the time of understanding that 2 + 3 equals 5. When Charles was able to, first of all, pull from himself and feel that, he was feeling that from intuition, or tapping into the mind of the Creator, his mind as Elohim. That did not come from a place of intellect. And as we talk about that connection that he made with that young man, again, what Charles said made no sense whatsoever from an intellectual standpoint. And that young man, why he was able to receive it, is because he received it through that connection that you mentioned, as which was his heart. You mentioned a while ago about the way in which we typically look at forecasting and trying to predict the future. Once again, when that is coming from a place of intuition, the forecasting is not so much of trying to predict, but it already knows, because, like I said before, all that will be created has already been created. And then for you or we are tapping in from a place of all knowing. So I just wanted to, I had several other thoughts, but I wanted to mention those things for better understanding as we discuss that intuition over and over again, what actually is taking place. And also, like Nick said, it is what we are sharpening. What we're doing is becoming more acquainted with that, what we would sometimes consider soft voice, to be able to recognize and tap into our intuition, and more so reside there on a more permanent basis than actually dealing with all the distractions. And yes, it takes a desire to reach that point, But when you're able to, when we are able to more easily understand and hear and operate in that Elohim mind of all, intuition, is actually easy. The work is coming in to allow that to more easily happen, because it just naturally happens. I'm finished.
May I add to that?
Sir?
Yes, sir.
When we were talking about intuition, I think that we are actually functioning based on intuition and not really noticing it.
Oh yes, thank you.
Uh,
I was thinking about that. Sorry, I got excited. Yes, that and I want you to expand on that. No, because I was thinking about that earlier, and I didn't know, when to say something, or was just gathering. But yes, please go into further how a lot of times, just naturally, there's not a person, a human being on this earth who is not operated from a place of intuition, but without knowing it, it happens quite often. Please continue. I got excited.
that's okay. Um, we do it every weekend. We do it every time we teach because you don't know what questions are coming. We start by asking, are there any questions? And if you don't know what questions are coming, you cannot prepare for them. So the responses to the questions are not intellectual at all. It is intuition based upon spiritual wisdom. It is Elohim who's processing and answering the questions because the source knows all things. Uh, in everyday life, we function through intuition when you step back from a door because you feel like somebody's going to open it, it's going to hit you. Or as Barbara was talking about, the approaching car. We do that all the time. You slow down because you know somebody's going to run a light. We do it all the time and don't realize it. However, I really believe that those of us who are talking about it really didn't notice how long we have been functioning in it. The difference is this: we function with intuition based on spiritual wisdom when we are teaching, when we are bringing clarity. However, do we approach life the same way? The things that we are impacted by, do we approach them the same way we do when we are teaching or when a question is raised? Do we ask ourselves in everyday life, what can I do to rectify this? What am I to learn? Those kinds of things. And don't try to process it with our minds. Let it process us so we can get a clear vision of what the response should be. I'm done.
Pastor, that was my supposition that I have. It kind of led me into it because I really don't know how to explain this or say it. But for several things have been said, and everybody has said what I'm thinking. But S mentioned the two sides of self, and what if the supposition asked the question, what if those first 5, maybe even 6 senses is a different world than the 8th sense? And we operate most of the time from the world that we're familiar with. For example, when we pray or meditate on forgiveness, let's say, there is a forgiveness that operates in this shallow world, and that forgiveness is based on what we've been taught as far as restoring somebody to a state before the incident happened. Let's say, let's use that definition. But the true essence of forgiveness through the beginning, or using that eighth sense, using it from the perspective of Elohim, is I restore you back to the beginning, the essence of who you are, the essence of what you were supposed to be, man is designed to be. So I take you back to even before an embryo stage. I take you back to your spiritual nature. And that is the forgiveness that carries power. That is forgiveness. So as Nick said, if you can focus on that and push all your energy there, as opposed to that world that you're familiar with, this forgiveness looks right and feels right because that's what I see, that's what I'm familiar with. But if I learn to operate daily as Elohim and stay in that world and that part that part of me, then I see the true essence of forgiveness. The same thing with healing. If I say I'm praying for someone and you are healed, and I take you back to the place before this, whatever your illness is, happened, then what have I done that has brought about healing? If this thing has been laying dormant in you and you have been carrying the burden of mankind for hundreds of years, so I have not brought you back anywhere, but the true essence of this is making you whole. So I restore you. If I'm Elohim, leave that level of comfort, that world of comfort, and take you back to a place that mankind was designed to be in the very beginning. So it's a different energy that we carry. It's a different energy that we're learning to tap into, and as you say, learning to operate on that in every step, as opposed to just when we're teaching, or as we say, some of the examples you gave when we're driving or whatever. How do we tap into that and stay there and learn to focus on that? Because as I said to you, Pastor, in some of the private conversations we've had, it's not that I don't think these things are available. I think there's something that we haven't seen yet. There's a part of this that we haven't seen yet. And I think learning about this eighth sense and this intuition and this intuitiveness of that is the true essence of who you are, I think answers all of those questions and opens the door to those things that have been a mystery to us. And if somebody can explain that, I'd appreciate it, because I probably messed it up.
Yeah.
Good morning. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you haven't spoken. Go ahead. I'll speak after you.
Yeah, good morning, everyone.
Go ahead,
this is George. And I wanted to, respond to, what SC is teaching on in terms of the eighth sense, and something that, I've been, continually, in prayer and meditation about is speaking on the subject of recovery. And for some of you, that's an area, desire that I'm beginning to see some breakthrough in terms of the eighth sense of recovery. And, speaking on the 11th step, or that process in terms of spiritual disciplines for recovery. And it says in step 11, have sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, and praying for the knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry it out. And I know, Pastor, I've spoken to you in terms of just some of the stigma that people speak about in terms of I am an addict. And I don't think that the Creator, has created us to be an addict in that sense in terms of substance abuse, but I think that the breakthrough is coming through this eighth sense to know that as we see prayer and meditation being the same thing, but to improve our conscious contact, not with God, but being Elohim, and to understand Elohim, ST, as you said, in terms of our own self-journey. But I think now we're coming into that understanding of Elohim And we have the power now to be able to carry that out, that we don't have to be enslaved to the system or these stigmas that we've been given, but now we're able to be free from it because of who we are. So, Pastor, I just wanted to share that thought because I know that that's something that, we've talked about in the past, and even those of you who visit Philadelphia as far as dealing with the addiction issue. But I just wanted to share those thoughts. I'm done, Pastor.
Okay. Thank you. As far as when we talk about, we spoke of the I am an addict, I am an alcoholic. My break with that came when I realized what was being done. That's an affirmation that you're an addict, which means that you'll always be addicted to something, whether it be religion, or whether it be drugs, or whether it be food. I am addicted to something. Is what you're affirming, and that affirmation is said to help remind you of what you've been freed from, but it actually reminds you of what you're in bondage to. And those affirmations came from religion, came from intellect. They did not come from the spiritual. However, in regards to that, when Kathy was talking about I am and whatever else comes after that is what you are, that in itself gives us a clearer insight into the reasoning that we should never, ever affirm that we are anything other than who we were created to be. In regards to what Ron was talking about with referring to the two sides of us, we call it the physical and the spiritual. However, I think we're at the place now where we are dealing with something more in depth than the physical and the spiritual. I think it's been refined to the place where we can say that it's between religion and spirituality. The religious forgiveness is speaking words. Through experience, I have processed people who have done things, everything from arson to murder, to robberies, abortions. I have processed people through those things, and they said that they have forgiven or been forgiven. However, when I processed them through it, what I found out is none of them have forgiven the perpetrators. They thought they had because their religion told them by saying that you have. When they come face to face with it again, and I bring them there spiritually, they cannot say those words. It's hard for them to say, I forgive you, when they come face to face to the incident, whether it's rape or murder. However, in the spiritual, we don't have to say those words. Why? Because when you are functioning as Elohim, forgiveness is just as easy as breathing. It does not take time for you to process anything to forgive. Forgiveness is something that you don't even have to give thought to because that's who you are. Forgiveness is not something that you give that's separate from you. When you are forgiven, then you are giving yourself to them to help guide them to that place of redemption or that place of beginning, that place that they existed in before the illness took place. So I think right now we are actually expanding the outlines that we have been teaching of forever and a day seemingly. And now we're beginning to deal with it from a purely spiritual perspective because religion is not physical. Religion is a false sense of spirituality. It is a philosophical belief that masquerades as spirituality from Elohim. So with having said all of that, I want to conclude by saying We are to be cognizant of what we put behind I am, or how we finish that sentence. And we have to also uh, be at a place where we don't have to contemplate forgiveness, because as long as we have to contemplate it, the question becomes, are you functioning as Elohim, or are you still struggling to do that? Don't lie to yourself, be honest with yourself, and continue the journey. And you will get to that place where you function purely as Elohim. I'm done.
Okay. I wanted to go back to what you, when you said it earlier, you were kind of asking the question about do we operate a certain way in our life function? I put it to this point personally for me. If you think about it, like everything that we do day in and day out, what is the foundation of how we operate? And this, for me, actually, personally, is how I kind of got to thinking along this line. Was that initially when I was smaller, young kid, my source of wisdom and how I operated day in and day out, the source that I identified with was my grandmother and my mother. And so, when you grow up and you mature, that's still, that foundation, still the source. But then, it's tough. You kind of watch your sources kind of decline or deteriorate over the years. And that's where I found myself last year, just thinking, okay, I really got to look deeper inside of me and really connect to where it should be. Not that they were, terrible role models, anything like that. They were a source of wisdom, but my wisdom was only going to be to the point of what I took from them. And so we identify with different people. And so that's what kind of pushed me to really get more of that source into myself and understand how I need to operate and function as Elohim. And then I'll look at, them deteriorating. They've done what they were supposed to do for me, but at the same time, I'm at that point where I have to put it on myself to develop. And so everybody kind of ask yourself, what is your combination of wisdom and your sources? What do you identify with to operate daily? What was the foundation of that? And then to say, okay, now am I willing to take the next step and put the focus and the onus on myself? Because, I did learn certain things from my grandmother and mother, and they really, shaped, what I believe and see. But at the same time, there's more wisdom that I've taken in over years, and I owe it to myself to develop beyond that point so that I can even be, a better version of myself. And so when you were saying that, I thought of that question is what is everybody's source of not necessarily just doing the simple things, but your philosophy and operating day in, day out. And that's where we're kind of shifting and taking that wisdom that we understand, because it is wisdom that's attached to the intuition, but also understanding there is a higher connection that I need to make and understand and uncover so that I can constantly operate in that higher power, if that makes sense.
It does. The difficulty is because of what we've been exposed to. We were exposed all our lives, most of us anyway, to religion. And we were labeled Christians. And that's how we labeled ourselves. I am a Christian. However, the principles that we were taught were Christian principles. We did not see them acted out by the people who taught them. I'm talking about leadership in terms of Sunday school, pastoral stuff. That's what I'm talking about. Not only that, but even we did not find ourselves as children or as young people operating or functioning based upon those principles. It was impossible to function based upon Christian principles. And what made it more difficult is knowing that even the ones who were teaching them, and again, I'm not talking about parental teaching, I'm talking about the leadership in religion teaching them. We saw that they were not being lived up to. So what did we do? We sneaked around and we hid the things that we did as they did. We made excuses for what were deemed to be shortcomings. However, what we have learned is that these religious principles were simply principles that were instituted by the minds of men with no influence from the Creator at all. And now, what we have to purge ourselves of the residual Christian principles that we have had left in us, so that we do not respond to spiritual principles in the same way. Christian principles are principles that are designed to create guilt in you, and that guilt is to force you to stay attached to those principles, even though they don't work, and stay attached to that group, my church family, that kind of thing, regardless of what's going on. Spiritual principles, on the other hand, help you to look in a mirror and see your shortcomings and improve upon them. And improving upon them means becoming more aware of who you were created to be, not being condemned by your mistakes, but being strengthened as a result of responding to your mistakes. That's the difference between religion and Christianity and spirituality, or Islam and spirituality, or Judaism and spirituality, or Hinduism and spirituality. That's the difference in them, is that one is condemnatory and manipulative, and the other one is self-inventory. I hope that is clear. I'm done.
Yes, and Pastor, good morning. This is Kathy. I think I have a question, or I'm following everything that you're saying, and I love this lesson, everything that was said yesterday and today. And I'm looking at us being intentional and internalizing, and I'm listening to what you were saying this morning. And I thought about Audrey's question on yesterday about wisdom, and I think Pastor just described the difference in corrupt wisdom versus understanding the wisdom of Elohim, and that's the wisdom that we're speaking of. What I'm finding is that I personally am more intuitive when I am helping someone else. I have no problems automatically going inside myself to find that answer, to help you reach a state of balance or whatever it is that you're seeking when you're coming to me. My question is, and listening to what Nick said yesterday when he gave us the example of just practicing, not even saying two-letter words, putting that into practice, that made me stop and think. And I love that. I think that's something that we all can actually look at. But what I'm learning to do too, and I wanted to ask about this, when I am put in a situation where I'm the recipient of bad news, when I'm receiving that bad news, instead of spiraling out, or instead of just, oh no, what am I going to do? I learn to sit with it now. And the first thing I ask myself is, what do you feel? And what I'm learning is, I don't feel the anxiousness and the anxiety that has in the past would have been associated with that degree of bad news. Then the next thing that I'm doing is I'm asking myself, then, what should you do next? What are you going to do about this? Is there something you should do? And then I make my decisions from the inside out. And so I'm finding, if I'm hearing what you guys are saying and I'm internalizing it the right way, this thing about being intuitive is an internal thing that brings me to a place of balance. And I am learning to trust my feelings from the inside as opposed to the feelings that I would have felt externally? Or is that part of this exercise and learning to be, as Nick said 100 years ago, set your course and just be? What I'm learning that be is be intentional. Since I'm learning to be more intentional instead of just spazzing out the moment I hear something bad or something puts me, or I'm faced with something I'd rather not be faced with. If I can just, and I even see that to me as my method of meditation even, where I'm not, like you said yesterday, as you can't cross your legs and sit, you can't even cross your legs right now. But if I can stick with it and internalize from the inside out what I am feeling about that, then I am clearer on remaining in a place of balance and what I need to do next. Because I then hear it from the inside out. And all of those other times when I've been told something and I just suppressed that and didn't think that was me, being Elohim or not understanding that was me, being able to operate from that eighth sense. This lesson is now awakening that in me and showing me and helping me to understand, like we said all along, like Pastor and everyone has said this morning, we've been doing it. We just didn't know we were doing it. And there were a lot of times when we suppressed it because we thought it was just us thinking something. So I guess my question is it also practice when I learn to feel from the inside out? Is that being intuitive? Because that's what I'm doing more of, and I find I don't freak out when something bad happens. I'm intentional about what I need to be doing and listening, and it's coming more naturally for me, just as it would if I was sitting with someone else trying to help them. Does that make sense, or am I seeing this the right way?
No,
It makes sense.
absolutely.
Yeah. So, Kathy, what you actually said is beautiful. And yes, what you're doing every single time you do that, if we go through something in a situation where we just get upset, and a lot of us do it, we can get upset over and over and over and over again at the same exact thing until it's just basically extremely repetitive and we're just doing it over and over again. What you're actually doing every single time that you say you stop and you're thinking about, why do I feel this way? Where is this all coming from? How can I handle it, et cetera, et cetera? Every single time you're doing that, you're making great leaps and bounds in your awareness and understanding yourself, and in a sense, growing. And you're expanding yourself beyond that intellect mind that we actually just talked about. In a sense, when we get real focused, when we're upset, we have a very straightforward mind where pretty much we eliminate everything, and our focus is sharply upon that thing that is upsetting us. This is very, very direct and straight. As you're now opening your self up, because that's what intuition is opening your self up beyond. And as we mentioned earlier, that mind of God, the intellect of God, every thought that has ever existed and will ever exist, you're then opening yourself up to that. We talk about being able to hear clear, an example for that soft voice, because you are lowering the dial, the volume, so to speak, on this raging voice that's just extremely upsetting. You are allowing that other voice, the more prominent voice, to actually to be heard. The other thing that you're doing every time that has happened, when I was talking about getting stuck in that repetitive loop, is that you are growing beyond that thing and actually learning from whatever just took place. Now, when this thing actually occurs again, it has a totally different effect on you, or maybe it doesn't even actually occur again, period, because that lesson or whatever growth you needed to actually needed to happen already took place. So, for example, we mentioned before, sometimes we mention the idea of karma and punishment. Karma and punishment do not actually exist in a sense in the way that we think about it. Those are opportunities for us to grow. And once you grow beyond a particular thing, then that idea of punishment or karma doesn't exist. If we were to do something, let's say bad, and this is why I say the idea of karma doesn't exist. If we were to do something, let's say, for lack of better words, that is bad or terrible, that thing has no need to come back up if we've already processed it and learned that lesson, and we've grown beyond the need for that thing to come up to bring correction within our selves. So, no, what you just described is beautiful, and that's exactly what we're talking about in terms of the work that we've been just talking about, all together for quite some time now. I'm finished.
Thank you, Sheldon.
No, all I was going to say was, and Sheldon said it. He said it beautifully, and you've over time, you've been able to process different memories and experience, and that intuition is always attached to the wisdom that that you've developed, and then you also, so like Charles, in the moment of receiving this upsetting news, or just what you don't really want to hear at the time, you've learned who you are in those moments of time. So like what Sheldon said, to overcome it. And then one thing about intuition and wisdom is, I read it in one of the articles I was reading. When we get to that point of operating in that way, that regard, the quote was sort of like, wisdom coupled with intuition, it's always going to be a safeguard for us. It's always going to safeguard us against anything, because it says the opposite of that is a man who thinks he's doing the right thing by operating on his intellect and external factors. He thinks he's doing the right thing, but in the end, it's to his death. So we are getting to the point, like Sheldon said, the growth is there, and we're attaching it so much to our wisdom and intuition that we still have, an emotional attachment. But that emotional attachment, it's the emotions are balanced out by intuition and wisdom, safeguarding our heart, safeguarding our emotions, so that we are still able to operate. We're still able to operate. I don't want to say just in spirit, but you're able to operate based on, like you said, your internal factors, because it's inside of you. You've internalized it so much that in that you just knowing you, like the unselfishness, it's internalized so much that it's something that somebody else may need to tap into. For example, and that's something else somebody else needs to tap into as well, because it does grow, and we do safeguard ourselves with the more wisdom and intuition that we're able to develop.
And so, ST, basically where we went wrong, well, I won't say we went wrong, where we got bogged down, was we put so much emphasis on external feelings that we didn't learn to live out of the internal feelings. Because if I can stay in that mode of feeling it internally and feeling my way through it and navigating it from the inside of me, from a place of balance, I usually end up making the right decision. If I go from what I'm feeling externally and I get into my feelings, so to speak, and then I want to make decisions from being upset, being unhappy, being angry, being disgruntled, whatever that feeling is at that moment, if I act from that place, then that's when I'm not being intuitive. That's when I'm not going to be living as Elohim and operating as Elohim in that situation, if I'm seeing it correctly.
That's correct, and that's exactly why we all have to do it for ourselves, because we all have different triggers. We all have a different way that we need to, Nick used the word cope with it, to channel that, what we were using for coping, to channel it for growth. But that's why it's so important for us that we all have to experience it and do it for ourselves. But that's exactly right.
And I do want to point out. Go ahead, sorry.
As Kathy, as you spoke, what I thought about as you just said what you said was, when we allow the external things to get in and cloud our thinking and our judgment, it's like we're letting those external things entangle us. But when we think clearly from the thoughts within, from being in touch with self, and not being distracted and by those external things that are just waiting there to tangle us up and to capture our attention, what I heard you say is that's when we have the clearer understanding and thoughts of what's right, at least for me, what's right for me in a given situation or circumstance as I'm confronted with whatever the issue is. But the more I allow the external stuff to get in there, I can potentially be confused by allowing all that stuff in. So thank you for that. That clarifies for me some things.
Thank you. Exactly, because you said it in a different way, and that clears it up too. Thank you.
What you're talking about is what the scripture means when it says, "Be angry, but sin not." When those feelings are external, and Barbara, you're talking about getting tangled up with those external feelings. Well, what you're describing is sinning. Sin is entanglements. And it doesn't matter what you're entangled with. If it distracts you from who you are, it's sinning. So, however, when you stop and process internally, then you're being guided by spiritual wisdom. So what we've been doing is sinning and not realizing it because of being entangled with our external feelings and with our intellectual thoughts. We've been sinning. And the reason we didn't notice it is because subconsciously we still see sin as what we were taught sin is. Thou shalt not do this or shalt not do that. So I see a clear connection between being disentangled and being guided by the internal experiences. Thank you.
And the last quick thing I wanted to say, I'd be remiss for everyone that's listening, not to point out that Kathy did not just ignore that she was angry and just tell herself, "Oh no, I'm not angry." She felt that anger, acknowledged it, and then went, in a sense, deeper into that anger. Or if you want to talk about it from a sin standpoint, in terms of being in a knot, she acknowledged the knot and then went and did the work or started to unloosen the knot. She just didn't turn her back on the knot and say, "Oh, no, I don't see that knot. That knot doesn't exist. No, 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 no." That's not what she did. So I want to point that out right quick. Oh, I'm finished.
Sheldon, you just spoke to naming and claiming. Somebody tell you that you got COVID and you say, "I'm not claiming that." Well, you don't have to claim it. You already got it. The question is what you're going to do about it. So again, it's not that she ignored the claiming of it. It exists. So what am I going to do? And that's one of the reasons I want to say this forcefully. Do not engage in conversation where you know doggone well things exist, but you saying I'm not going to claim it. That doesn't make sense. That's not spiritual. That's religious gibberish. That's religious manipulation, misconception, and miss everything else you can think of. That's an entanglement that causes you to lose your sense of direction, and now you're not able to see the solution to the issue because you are denying its existence by simply saying, "I'm not going to claim it." Thank you.
And that is idea of position, heal thyself.
Yep.
I think, is there any other comments or questions? I think we put a lot out there, and maybe a good stopping point. But really, I think this intuition, like I said, it's something we need. We use it every day. We're not aware of it, but just being able to tap in and kind of control the funnel, so to say, and control the flow is what we're trying to do, just so that we can operate better. But everybody think about it. Think about what your source is for your daily decisions, your daily operating, and you'll see the gap. You'll see where, okay, you know what, and it's not a bad thing to have a gap. It just lets you know what your what your goals are. And I just kind of see, for me personally, I just kind of set some goals and things I wanted to get better at. I wanted to put some things in place that I practiced, what I was trying to do. And we talked about it yesterday, especially with intuition. Like, there's things you can do to kind of sharpen the skills, but just practice, not say practice what you preach, but just practice it and just, get yourself mentally and spiritually just involved with your own growth from that perspective. And like I said, I can't reiterate enough that it's a self-taught deal, because you have to do what you have to do for your own individual situation. Like, we're given the wisdom, we're given the words and the things that we know. We've got the foundation, but this is one of those things that you really have to develop in yourself, and then the connection will be made. The connection will be made, and we'll know when's the right time to do whatever we need to do, and it just flows better. But it's just like I said, get it for yourself, put yourself in that position, because you know what you need, and you'll feel it. And so we all have different motivations anyway. But I thought it was a great discussion today, and I really appreciate everybody, pitching in, because it just makes it flow that much better. And the questions always help and gives me things to go back and think about too. But that's what I have for today. And if anybody's got any other questions or comments, please say it.
Thank you, sir.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Well, everyone have a good day, and we'll be on tomorrow, 6 o'clock.
Thank you, ST.
You said you were going to announce the line.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, I wanted to say that, I want to make the statement to everyone. Make sure that you share the phone number, the new number, with everyone. We may be repeated, but it's okay. I just want to be sure that everyone has the number. So if you think of anyone who may not have it, please give it to them. Thank you.
All right.
Yes, I don't have it.
Can you say what the number is?
Give me a second. The number is 404-920-6448.
Is there
Same
code?
passcode?
Is the same code?
Code is the same.
Okay. So we'll start using this, starting tomorrow or next week?
No, but you can use it as we were using the other one. It just changed, that's all.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Well, Pastor, we were able to get in with the old code, the old number today. So I would say I would try the old number, and if it doesn't work, then try the new one.
Okay, I know that. Because when I used the new one, it and put the code in, It just told me wait for an. Okay. You hear that?
Okay, but we all came in on the old code, some of us this morning.
Okay. Is there anyone who came in with a new number? I guess not. Okay. All right. Thanks for that. We'll meet
You're
again
welcome.
tomorrow.
Thank you. Everybody have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.